You know, the smile, the tongue sticking out, the irreverent attitude that seems to care about nothing. But what if I told you that behind every bold gesture, there's a story marked by suffocating pressures, painful rebellions, and a desperate search for identity? Miley Cyrus. To some, a symbol of freedom. To others, a walking scandal. But for her, for a long time, just a girl trying to figure out who she really was in a world that only accepted her inside a box. Before we dive into this story full of highs and lows, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any revelations, and stay until the end. You're going to be surprised. Miley Cyrus was born on November 23, 1992, in Franklin, Tennessee, in the heart of the southern United States. Daughter of Billy Ray Cyrus, a country star known for the hit Achy Breaky Heart, she grew up surrounded by music and fame, but also by the tensions and instabilities that life in the spotlight brings. From a young age, Miley showed talent. At 13, she was chosen to play Hannah Montana, a character that would become a global phenomenon on the Disney Channel. Her face was everywhere: backpacks, magazines, notebook covers, posters in the bedrooms of millions of teenagers. On the outside, it was the perfect fairy tale. A star who sang, acted, and seemed to have everything under control. But on the inside, things were very different. The Disney contract demanded more than talent. It demanded absolute control over her image. Her hair, her clothes, her behavior, everything had to convey purity and perfection. Miley couldn't mess up. She couldn't just be Miley. She had to be Hannah Montana all the time. Little by little, the line between character and person started to blur. She lived in two worlds, the one of the impeccable star and the one of the real teenager, full of doubts, desires, and curiosities. And the bigger fame got, the harder it became to maintain both versions of herself. The pressure came early. The schedule of filming and tours was exhausting, and her personal life began to get lost in the midst of work. Miley barely had time to just be a 15-year-old girl. And when she tried to be, she was judged. A controversial photo, a different outfit, and the headlines exploded, accusing her of corrupting her wholesome image. In 2008, when she was just 15, private photos leaked and became a national scandal. Disney, concerned about the Hannah Montana brand, pressured Miley to apologize publicly. Imagine having to apologize to the world for something that was part of your coming of age, and still carry the weight of shame in front of millions of people. That was the first crack in the perfect image. But it was also the start of a silent rebellion. Miley didn't want to live to please everyone anymore. She wanted to own herself, but the industry wasn't ready to see the good girl transform. With the end of Hannah Montana in 2011, Miley was free from the character, but not from the expectations. She was no longer the sweet teenager the public knew. She was ready to provoke, shock, and break norms, even if it meant destroying herself in the process. And from then on, scandals would stop being the exception and become the rule. Because when someone spends their whole life trapped in a box, the explosion can be devastating. But if you think that was the worst phase of Miley's life, wait until you see what happened next. When the curtain closed on Hannah Montana, you might think Miley finally had the freedom to be who she wanted. But the truth is, for someone who grew up under constant control, too much freedom can be like fire, hot, dangerous, and impossible to hold. And Miley didn't just get burned, she set everything around her ablaze. 2013, the world was about to meet a completely different version of the Disney girl. The album Bangers wasn't just music, it was a statement. She cut her hair, ditched the modest clothes, and took the stage with provocative outfits, explicit dances, and sharp lyrics. Do you remember the VMA performance when she went on stage with Robin Thicke? The body grinding, the suggestive moves, the tongue sticking out, and the world in shock. For many, it was the end of the Miley they knew. For her, it was just the beginning of a war to destroy the image that imprisoned her. But there was a detail no one saw clearly. Behind the boldness and rebellion, there was a profound loneliness. Miley no longer knew who she really was. Was she the Tennessee girl? The child star? The sexualized rebel? Or just a sum of all the expectations others had of her? With fame came excess. Endless parties, drugs, alcohol, toxic relationships. She later admitted to using marijuana daily, experimenting with LSD, and drinking to try to shut off her mind. The stages were just the showcase, the real chaos happened behind the scenes. And as her image transformed, her love life became part of the spectacle too. Her relationship with actor Liam Hemsworth, which began in 2009, was unstable and intense. Between breakups and makeups, they seemed to live in a cycle of passion and destruction. Every split became news. Every reconciliation, a broken promise waiting to implode. But the breaking point wouldn't come just from love. 2018 brought a tragedy that would change everything. The California wildfire destroyed the home she shared with Liam. In a matter of hours, the space that represented safety turned to ashes. Miley said she lost everything: photos, memories, personal belongings, and that loss was the final push for impulsive decisions. Months later, she and Liam got married. But the marriage didn't last. The divorce came in 2019, accompanied by a flood of speculation, rumors, and attacks on social media. And, as always, Miley's personal life became fuel for headlines and judgments. During this period, she dove headfirst into a cycle of self-destruction. Even more intense parties, brief and controversial relationships, and a deep dive into substance abuse. The rebellion no longer felt like liberation, it felt like escape. In later interviews, Miley admitted she reached a point where she no longer recognized herself. The pressure of the industry, combined with personal losses, pushed her toward increasingly extreme behaviors. And the worst part, the feeling that, no matter what she did, the world always had a ready-made opinion about who she should be. When the body starts to give out and the mind can't take it anymore, the fall is inevitable. Miley faced vocal health issues, needed surgery, and was forced to step away from the stage. For someone who lived in constant motion, stopping was like facing all the ghosts she'd been avoiding for years. But rock bottom still hadn't been reached. Because as much as the parties and rebellion drew attention, the real collapse was still to come. And when it came, it exposed the most fragile and lost Miley the world had ever seen. And that's what we're going to talk about in the final part. You've seen the shine. You've seen the rebellion. But now, it's time to see the darkness. When the party ends, the silence is deafening. And it was in that silence that Miley finally realized the size of the void she carried. After the divorce, the fire, the criticism, and the emotional overload, she found herself in a place where neither music, nor fame, nor excess could fill the hole growing inside her. The world saw an eccentric star. But in the mirror, she saw a girl desperately trying to find herself again. Social media, once an ally for connecting with fans, became a battlefield. Any photo, any comment, any action, turned into ammunition for cruel judgments. They called her unstable, crazy, lost. And no matter how much she tried to ignore it, the words cut deep. In interviews, Miley admitted to periods of completely abstaining from social media, trying to protect her mental health. But she always came back, because the industry's pressure and the connection with her audience were part of her job. It was a cycle that hurt, and one she didn't know how to break. It was during this time that she started speaking more openly about anxiety, depression, and her struggle with her own addictions. She acknowledged that, for years, she used drugs and alcohol as emotional anesthesia. As she herself said, "I didn't want to feel, so I turned myself off." But that disconnection came at a price. Her body started showing signs of exhaustion. Vocal cord issues required delicate surgery, forcing her to stop singing for months. For someone whose identity was so tied to the stage, it was like losing a piece of herself. During recovery, away from the spotlight, Miley had to face her story unfiltered. Relive painful memories. Recognize self-destructive patterns. And accept that the image the world had of her didn't have to be her truth. But that realization didn't come without pain. Many friends drifted away, some unable to handle her changes, others part of the life she needed to leave behind. Loneliness became routine. And loneliness, for someone used to applause in crowds, is like a constant echo reminding you that no one really understands what you feel. The darkest moment may have been when Miley realized she could lose everything, not just her career, but her own life, if she continued at that pace. The headlines no longer talked about music, they talked about scandals, relationships, controversies. The artist was disappearing behind the character she had created to survive. But, curiously, it was from that darkness that she began to seek light. She decided to stop using drugs, moderate alcohol, take care of her body and mind. That choice wasn't romantic or inspiring at first, it was desperate. It was that or sink for good. Even so, recovery wasn't linear. There were relapses, days when the urge to return to anesthesia was overwhelming. But Miley started to understand that facing the pain was the only way to truly free herself from it. Little by little, she returned to the stage. But with a different perspective. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. She didn't need to shock the world to feel she existed. And although the media kept trying to box Miley into labels, she learned not to let them define her. The price of living in the spotlight was high. Far higher than any fan can imagine. Because fame doesn't buy peace, doesn't erase trauma, and doesn't heal invisible wounds. And behind every smile you saw in photos, there was a weight that nearly destroyed her. This is the part of the story few want to hear, but it's the one that matters most. The pain that almost took Miley Cyrus from herself was the same pain that, one day, taught her to come back. Now that you know the dark side of this star, click on the other video and discover the other side of the story, the good side. After all this, what do you really think about Miley Cyrus? Tell us in the comments below.